Hello all. So today we continue our puzzle streak ladder. The last puzzle we left on was 1284, and we've done 10 of them so far. Today we'll be trying to get to 15 and possibly to the rating of 1400. So this first one right here, I do not see any direct threats on our own king. Um, I noticed that we are down a full exchange, I think. Yep. And also a pawn. So that gives me the clue that we're not just going to be winning an exchange or a rook or something here. It has to be something more because the material imbalance is already on in white's favor. So over here, let's look at the reasonable checks. These two are obviously bad, and we can't really do anything with any other piece. It has to be the queen. We can try creating the rooks. But we can assume that white will take back with their rook and playing queen c3 there doesn't really help because the rook can just block on b2. I also noticed that we can maybe play rook takes b1 and after king b1 um, we give a check on b4. But then the king can actually start running away towards the center of the board, and I think we do run out of checks there. So the important thing is we need to keep this rook on the b file because it helps block off this b2 square. So by starting with queen c3 check, his only option is to block with the rook, and then we can actually take the rook because the queen would be supported by the on b8. So let's play that and we get a success. So in this one, the important thing is to keep the rook on the b file um to help focus our firepower on b2. Okay, next puzzle. So the queen's kind of threatening the pawn here, and we're down a queen for a minor piece. So first thing I kind of notice is the king is out in the open, and these knights are in prime position to harass the king. Um, Looking at the checks in the position, we have this one, which doesn't really lead us anywhere because the queen can take. We have this one, which is also a capture, and we can play this, and then the pawn can take. And then I also noticed that we can play knight takes pawn, um, forking the king and the queen. And after the king moves, we can just take the queen free of cost because there's nothing to recapture back on c4. But I also noticed that we have knight takes d6 in the beginning. Um, Instead of delaying it by one move, where we first take the bishop, we also have knight takes pawn in the beginning. So really, the only debate here is um, whether we take the bishop first and then we take the pawn, landing the fork, or if we take the pawn and land the fork first. You might think it's prudent to trade off this knight for this bishop and then go for the queen, but it actually backfires on us in this case because if the knight takes bishop, it is possible for black not to recapture at all. This is all about um, weighing your opponent's options. The opponent isn't always going to play the obvious move that you think of. So knight takes bishop. Instead of recapturing, black can actually play king f7, and we don't, or actually we do have the opportunity there. Um, my bad. We can take the bishop and um, black can play king f8. Um, and we don't have the opportunity to land the fork on the queen and the king anymore. So yes, this puzzle is all about weighing your options or weighing the opponent's options and seeing whether he has any defensive resources he can use. Let's go. We're at 1392. That's a really good pace. So here, um, usually whenever the previous move was a capture, I like to go back and just see what white played. White played b6 and black chose to take with his a pawn. Now, we can recapture back. That's just the immediate move that comes to mind. Um, but then I noticed that um, with equivalent material, um, white versus black, and this knight is particularly pesky to dislodge because it's on a light square and we have a dark square bishop. So this bishop can never really touch this knight. Because of that, this knight serves as an excellent blockader to the pawn, and meanwhile, black's pawn is kind of free to move, um, and it might even potentially become dangerous, whereas our pawn is pretty much harmless. It's going to be stuck on this b6 square forever. Therefore, um, the other options we have are moving the bishop or moving the king. We obviously don't want to play h5, but if we do any of those, then black is going to capture our pawn. So it must be something to do with this pawn. And instead of taking, the only other option really is to push it. And the good thing is it comes with tempo. Um, it comes with tempo, and therefore black cannot move his king to come back and protect the queening square because he won't have time to do it. Moving the pawn attacks the knight, and after his knight moves somewhere, we can push again, and it's going to be impossible for black to stop the pawn queening. Alternatively, and I think this might be black's best bet, um, we push the pawn and black starts coming back for his king. We push again, this time, sorry, to a7, and um, black goes here, then we queen. So this knight being here actually stops the king from making um, a quick entry to the queening square. This bishop also does a really good job of controlling the key squares. So yes, let's push the pawn. He gives a check. I didn't really consider this, but we can obviously just take the knight, and the pawn is still going to be in a unstoppable position. So yes, and then we push the pawn. Okay, we are down a full rook here. So that tells me that it has to be something immediate. Reasonable checks. Really the first thing that sticks out to my mind is queen takes pawn. And I noticed that black king actually can't go anywhere. He has to block with his queen. After that, really the only other reasonable check is queen to f6 check. We don't want to trade queens there because then we would just be down a full rook without any potential for counterplay. So yeah, this one just honestly kind of solves itself. Queen to f6 check, and you'll notice that black doesn't have any squares in that position. When the queen's giving check over here, the black king can't go forward because the queen's actually there, and he can't step to the g file because this rook patrols it. So he's going to be forced to block with this queen again, after which we can take, and it would be checkmate. So that one pretty much just solves itself looking at the forcing moves. Okay, next. So this one, I noticed a lot of minor pieces geared towards the Black King. Um, I don't really see any immediate threats on our king. So really the first thing that sticks to my mind is bishop to h7. It's a forcing move and it's nicely supported by the knight. These rooks, I don't think are going to get involved because this rook is way farther in the action, and this rook is kind of blocked off by this knight. So this option also isn't available because the knight can take. So bishop h7 would be the first thing I would look at. From there, black has two moves, two legal moves, king h8 and king f8. The good thing about having so many minors near the king is after king h8, we can actually just play knight to g6 and it would be checkmate. It also happens to be the same case if king f8, because we can play knight g6 and cover this e7 square. The knight covers the f7 square, and the bishop obviously covers the g8 square. So yes, that is a checkmate in two. I don't really see a checkmate in one, so we can go for that. So he goes to h8, which is the more inferior square, I think. But yes, knight to g6 is checkmate. So that concludes it for this part. We've reached 1474, and yes, I think it is a good place to stop. See you in the next part.